So let's get to the point. What's your name and what are you doing here?
So my name's James Power. I'm the general manager of Raspberry Point Oysters, and I've been growing oysters for about 30 years in Prince Edward Island.
So why is it called Raspberry Point?
Well, Raspberry Point is the name of the point of land where we had our first oyster lease. So we used that to describe where we grew the oysters.
Great, so how did you get into this?
Well, this was just a hobby for the owner and me. What we did was we used to fish oysters in the public and place them in front of the cottage so that we could enjoy oysters any time of the year.
How did you get into fishing oysters?
Well,
what were you doing then?
We just really liked to eat oysters, and it was part of the ice cream business. So when I got hired, I was hired to make ice cream. But on the off times, I would help them with the oyster business.
How did you get into making ice cream? What's your background there?
Well, making ice cream, as it turns out, I studied chemistry in university. Nice. So I had a little background in some chemistry and decided that I would turn that into an ice cream making career.
So you're fishing with the guy with the ice cream and then...
Yeah, we decided that, instead of fishing oysters, we'd start growing them.
How back was this?
This was almost 30 years ago we started doing this.
Nice.
So we've been growing oysters now for 28 years.
What kind of oysters do you have?
So, Raspberry Point. So we have our Raspberry Point oysters. Okay. So we grow those. Those are bottom-grown oysters that we grow in New London Bay.
They look like this?
Yeah, so that's what this oyster looks like.
Okay.
It's a 3-inch oyster. And we sell the baby brothers of the Raspberry Point, shiny sea oysters.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we decided 20 years ago that we would start growing oysters on the surface. So that's where we get the Pickle Point oysters. So those oysters grow on the surface of the water, floating bags, as opposed to the seabed. As we grew and we ran out of room in New London Bay, we went to the next bay, which is Rustico Bay. Rustico Bay, we started growing the Daisy Bay oysters. And their baby brothers, of course, the Irish Point. And as time went on, we needed more space. So that's where we started growing the Lucky Lime oysters in a different spot.
So, wow, you really grew there.
Yes.
Okay, I get the point. So, tell me more about how do you pick a good oyster? Let's start there, James.
Well,
educate me.
The first thing you want to look for is you're actually looking for the smell. When an oyster smells, then you know that it's old or it's died. You don't want it to smell like anything, just want to smell like the ocean. The other thing you want to do is you can tap the oyster. When you tap that oyster, you get that really solid sound. Yeah. You know that it's full of liquid. If you have a dead oyster, you get a very hollow sound. And that's how you know that the oyster died, has lost all its liquid. Oysters from Prince Edward Island will last 30 days in refrigeration. They're very hardy. The reason that is, they've been environmentally conditioned over billions of years to survive for 4 to 6 months underneath the ice. So they know once they come out of the water and go into the cooler, they think it's winter time. So they just close up and get ready for the heat.
Okay. So how do you these are East Coast, right? Right. So do they all have a different flavor profile? Or?
Yeah. Oysters taste like the water they grow in. So every time you have a different salinity, different minerality in the water, that's what the oysters are going to taste like. So all these oysters, every different bay, rivers that we grow them in, they're going to taste a little bit different.
Such as more salty or less salt?
That's right. The salinity changes. Where we grow the Raspberry Point, it's 1 sandbar away from the ocean. So the salinity is just a little bit lower than what you would get in the ocean. Where we grow the Pickle Point, they're a little bit further upriver, so the salinity is a little bit less. So a little change in salinity makes a big difference in the oyster.
Okay. Let's talk about opening up an oyster. How do you open an oyster? A lot of people, they like them, but they can't shuck them, so they just go to the restaurant.
Well, here it is. With an oyster, you have 2 sides. You have the flat side that's on the top, rounded side on the bottom. I'm just going to take my trusty oyster knife. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to wiggle it into the back of the oyster, turn it like a key. I'm just going to cut. There's a little muscle on the top that holds the shell. I'll cut that off. Cut the muscle on the bottom. That's it. Ready to go.
That's it.
That's it. Easy as that.
And when you open up, do you see if it's good or not as well? Is there signs of
Yeah,
that?
especially this time of year. I'm going to look to see that it has some liquid in it.
Yeah, so there's liquid in there.
Yeah.
And what about the color?
Color's great, and just give it a little sniff to make sure that it smells great.
What kind of color are you looking for?
If you see a really white color, you know that oyster's really fat. It was probably grown on the surface, had lots to eat, and has a lot of sweetness to it. Oysters that grow on the seabed, they'll have a little bit more of a gray color, and they'll be probably more salty.
So this one, it's a little grayish, is that correct?
That's right. So this one grew on the bottom,
Okay.
which all the Raspberry Points do.
Well, let's talk about pairing them. With all the ones you have here, you got the daisies, Pickle Point, Chinese Sea, Raspberry, Lucky
Yep.
Limes. How would you pair those? What's the secret?
So
Let's get to the point.
So for me, if you're with a lot of oysters, if you're a wine drinker, you're looking for a nice, probably a sweet wine like a Gewürztraminer or something like that. Or for me, I actually like a dark beer, because that dark beer and then the salinity of the oyster work really well for me.
What about the shelf life? Say I go home, I buy them at the store, right?
Yep.
And I put them in the fridge. How do you store them and how long do they last?
So you can store them in your fridge anyway, just whatever bag or box they came in. You just want to keep them in your fridge, and they'll last 30 days from the harvest date. The harvest date will be displayed on the oyster tag. I don't have one.
Yeah, is there a special way you store them if they come in the box or in a bag from the store?
Yeah, if you're keeping them for a long time, maybe you want to put like a wet dishcloth over the top of them just to keep the shells from dehydrating. But if it's only a few days, they're fine.
So you don't have to store them on ice or anything?
No, and you don't want them to sit in fresh water, because if they take a drink of the fresh water, they'll actually die.
Yeah. Fresh water when they're in salt water, so do the math.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do we need to know about picking a good oyster or pairing it?
Yeah, so you just want to make sure that any oyster that's, if the oyster's open, that means it's dead. You don't want to eat that oyster. You want to tap to make sure that it's got a nice solid sound, full of liquid, and you want to give it a little sniff to make sure that it smells good. A bad oyster smells terrible.
You'll know the difference.
You'll know very quickly if it's a bad oyster. Other than that, pair it with your favorite drink. If you like to pair them with whiskey or scotch, I would suggest eat your oyster, save a little bit of the liquid. You can dump your scotch or whiskey in it, sip it from there. It's very delicious.
What about people? They go to a place and they put all these marinades and condiments on it without tasting the real brine in itself.
I would always suggest the first couple of oysters you try, make sure that you try them just plain and get a real flavor for what that oyster is going to taste like. After you've had a few oysters, then you can put your favorite topping on it and try them out.
So is the flavor from the actual meat or fat, or is it from the water or brine or liquor they call it?
Yeah, the oyster liquor is going to have a lot of the salinity in it, but the oyster meat, you want to make sure you chew that oyster to release all the goodness of the oyster. All the flavor of the oyster is going to be in that meat.
Okay, great. More information, website?
Website, raspberrypoint.com.
Thank you so much. I really get the point this time.
Very good.
Thank you for some pointers.
Thank you.
Pearls of wisdom.